I lived in Venice, California, and I was walking home from a friend's house late at night. I lived just a few blocks away, but I always felt nervous walking home alone at night. Venice has always been known for its kind of high crime rates and homeless population, and I always made sure to carry my pepper spray with me wherever I went. I had no intentions of becoming a victim in the city like the countless other women that I've heard of before, and everything seemed fine at first. The walk was short, and every now and then I'd pass another person and smile at them. It was late and I was nervous, but I tried my absolute best not to show it. I didn't want to seem vulnerable in any way, shape, or form. I was wearing an old backpack that I'd used in high school instead of carrying my purse to try to deter thieves, and I made sure to put on clothes that didn't show much of my body. There wasn't such a thing as being too careful to me, and as I was walking, I heard a man's raspy sort of smoker's voice behind me. "Excuse me, miss. Got any spare change?" I turned around to see what appeared to be a homeless man. His clothes were torn up with plenty of holes, and his eyes seemed to be wild. It almost seemed like his thoughts were wandering as he was talking. I just shook my head and told him that I didn't have any money and that I was sorry. But he didn't seem to appreciate that. "Come on, just a little bit." He persisted, his voice growing more aggressive. "A pretty girl like you is bound to have at least a few dollars on her." I hated talking to strangers, let alone a person who was apparently as unpredictable as this guy seemed to be. I didn't want to deal with the situation any longer and decided ignoring his statement would be the best option. I didn't want to upset him any further or make things harder on myself by rejecting his request for money again, so I just whispered a quick, "I'm sorry," and started to walk faster away from him, trying to put as much distance between us as I possibly could. The man followed, throwing insults here and there and eventually resorting to making threats. "You rich girls always think you're better than us. You're gonna regret this. I can promise you that." I was scared, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I quickened my pace even more to the point where I was basically running away from the guy, but he was still following me and surprisingly keeping up with me pretty well. I started to hear him getting closer, and I was terrified that he was going to attack me or hurt me. I reached into my pocket and I grabbed my pepper spray, ready just in case. I turned around, I pointed it at the man and yelled as loud as I could, "Leave me alone." I tried to sound brave, but it just came out as some little squeal. The homeless man just laughed in a way that gave my whole body chills. He took a step closer, and I aimed the pepper spray directly at his face. "Don't come any closer, please. I don't want to hurt you. Just leave me alone and I'll forget this ever happened," I warned, and my voice was shaking. But he didn't seem to listen. He just kept coming, and his eyes were just transfixed on me. I hadn't really used it before, but I squeezed the trigger, and a burst of pepper spray shot out, hitting him directly in the face. He screamed and buried his face in his hands as he stumbled backwards. I started to feel tears in my eyes as well, but I took that moment to run, and my feet pounded against the pavement as I raced back to my apartment. I locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I tried to catch my breath. I technically was safe now, but I just couldn't shake the fear that was beginning to creep over me. I knew that I couldn't let the homeless man's insults and threats get to me, but it was hard to ignore the fear that was beginning to gnaw at me, the fear that he would come back and try to hurt me again. I spent the rest of the night lying in bed, just sort of staring at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the man was just outside, waiting for me. Now I knew that I should have called the cops right then and there, but I've had issues in the past, and unless you're essentially being cooked alive, the cops' response time is just essentially next to never around here. Eventually, days turned into weeks, and I started to feel more confident in my life. I started to walk home alone again, and I didn't see that guy anywhere. I thought that maybe he had moved to another area, and maybe I was safe now, but I was wrong. One night, as I was walking home from work, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there he was again, his eyes seemingly blazing with anger, and it was like that entire night was playing over again in my mind, and it was clear that he'd not moved on from it at all. "You think you can get away from me?" he yelled, and he started to lunge towards me. I let out a scream, reaching for my pepper spray, but it wasn't there, and I suddenly remembered setting it on the kitchen counter and forgetting to grab it before I went out for the day. I turned to run, but he was too fast. He grabbed me, his fingers digging into my skin. I screamed, fighting against him, but he was too strong and his grip was unrelenting. I was screaming, punching, kicking, anything to get the man to let me go, but nothing was working. And just when I was starting to lose hope of escaping unharmed, I see a police car pull up and 2 officers jump out, rushing towards us. The homeless man released me, and I stumbled backwards as my knees buckled underneath me. The officers were able to apprehend him, taking him into custody, and I was finally safe. I sobbed as the officer told me that I would have to make a formal statement, and after that night, I never walked home alone again. I was too traumatized by what had happened. I never forgot that fear, and it stayed with me, a sort of constant reminder of what could happen when you aren't cautious enough of your surroundings or really the area that you're living in. Sometimes it's just not safe enough to walk home on your own, and there's nothing you can really do about it. The man was charged but received no jail time. I guess the jails in my area were already overpopulated, and his charge wasn't a serious one, so they informed me that they had to let him free. It didn't make me feel any safer, though. Hopefully I'm the last person he ever does that to, and no one else has to feel the same fear at the hands of that man. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.